Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
All right, so Zohran Mamdani went on the Majority Report with Sam Seder and was interviewed by them, did a quick interview about his priorities going forward, both as mayor, but also as he's setting up this transition team and trying to figure out his policy approach, not just on the main things that he's promised, but all the other things that go into being the mayor, and if don't go smoothly, are going to reflect badly on him. And so this idea is emerging that Zohran Mamdani and the DSA apparatus around him needs to do anything that they can to make sure his mayorship is successful, and that is the most important priority. And so in his recent decision to not endorse a primary challenger of Hakeem Jeffries, and to say that he would, as of right now, support Hakeem Jeffries being the Speaker of the House were the Democrats to win the majority. And some questions have arose because of that, as well as the meeting with Trump happening recently. That was a surprise for a lot of people. I know I've been talking about Zohran a lot, like the last 4 videos. I think this is the 5th one in a row that's about Zohran. So I'm going to move on. There's other stuff to talk about, but it's been a fast-moving situation. And I think part of what he says here on the Majority Report is a reflection of that. So I like some of what he says here, and in other places he's kind of giving us what we've heard already. But here's what he had to say on the Majority Report.
There's also been, talk about you were asked about supporting Hakeem Jeffries this weekend. I'm really curious as to it seems to me you have 2 constituencies. You have the citizens of New York City who elected you on 4 major material platforms. And then you also have movement people and who are looking for you to bring a politics that's associated with the DSA and progressive left of the Democratic Party. And there's people who are in both parts of that Venn diagram. I think we are probably. How do you serve both those things? Or do you feel that there have to be concessions made on one side or another, or both? I mean, how do you, what trumps, forgive the pun?
I think what gives me hope, frankly, is that I don't actually see these as 2 distinct constituencies innately of themselves. I think it's at the heart of both New Yorkers at large and of the movement that I'm so proud to be a part of, is a concern for the material. What does any decision actually mean for working people's ability to live a dignified life? And that, to me, has to be the framework through which I approach any decision or conversation. And there's been a lot of questions I've been asked of who won in the conversation you had with President Trump, and it is all geared towards a sense that it has to be one politician or the other politician. And what I've said is, in fact, that it was New Yorkers who won, because it's New Yorkers that we actually spoke about. And I actually told the president directly that, we launched our campaign on October 23rd of last year, but there were far more people who actually heard about us after the president won election, where we went and interviewed New Yorkers in the hearts of the neighborhoods that swung towards in New York City, right? Fordham Road in the Bronx, Hillside Avenue in Queens. And I spoke to the president how it was cost of living that brought those New Yorkers to his campaign, and cheaper groceries, and how we sought to build a campaign looking to answer the question of how do we bring those voters back into a Democratic primary and back into the politics of our city. And we did so by listening to their concerns and looking to build a platform that spoke directly to them as opposed to have to be translated to them. And even in the conversation around, the question of primary challenges. And, much of this I would say is typically private within DSA, but everything I've said has been reported publicly, so I might as well just speak about it to you directly. I went to the endorsement forum that was considering whether or not to endorse C in that primary challenge. And what I said there is that this is not a question of the ballot box of who you would rather vote for. This is a question of how you want to spend the next year. Do you want to spend the next year fulfilling the agenda at the heart of this movement, or do you want to spend it defending the caricatures of that movement? And the decision that I made, and the one that I shared with other members that night as they were considering how to participate in that democratic process, is to maximize every chance we have to fulfill the promises we made door after door, call after call, with many New Yorkers who had otherwise lost faith in politics years ago, so that we can tell them that success isn't just measured in the election we've already had, but also in our fulfillment of the agenda at the heart of that election. And I think it just comes back to that you need to speak directly to people, you need to speak about policies that are also direct to their lives, and it all needs to be without translation. And so to me, once we succeed in the fulfillment of any part of this agenda, it becomes an example of why New Yorkers made the right decision to believe that politics could be more than this, as opposed to that they were wrong to have hope again. We often talk about President Trump in the context of disagreements that we have around policies or personnel, but one thing that I've often reflected on is that it seems as if the speed that Washington moves at right now is thought of as if it's exclusive to this specific presidency or this party or this ideology, when in fact it could be a marker for any kind of politics. And that's what New Yorkers also need to see. It's not, I'm not going to announce, on day one that we're going to establish a study or something. It's that we actually have to be doing the work of delivering, and doing it in a way that New Yorkers can feel it in their lives, as opposed to something that they have to understand an intellectual level.
All right, so some good stuff from him there. I expected that this was going to be a little bit more of an in-depth conversation with him. What we did not get more details on that I wish we did was the actual dynamics behind his decision not to endorse Chiosei. He says here that those conversations are usually had in private. Remember, this is about whether or not DSA as a body was going to endorse Chiosei, more so than just whether Zohran was going to do it. Zohran endorsing him would have pressured DSA as a body to endorse him, and that could have gotten the ball rolling, supposedly. But really, it's the body as a whole, in part because Zohran advocated against a primary of Hakeem Jeffries at this time. So the body as a whole voted against endorsing Chiosei. So he said he's going to stay in DSA, and I'm not sure if he's going to keep his campaign going. So what we've heard is that now's not the right time, and clearly they seem to be focusing all of their political capital on achieving at least like the first something, you know what I mean? Something that he can go back to people with and say, I'm working, I'm trying to pull this off. And so everything that he's doing is geared towards that. He wants to, on day one, be able to operate in the way that he's been saying he's going to, where, he is moving around, he's talking to people, he's trying to make things happen. And that was one of the things that I appreciated about what he said here, is that people perceive the fast-moving pace and the way Washington sort of quickly changes under Trump as being something that's uniquely right-wing or uniquely characteristic of his movement. And so his intention to make the governing of New York a more fast-moving and quickly changing pace, I definitely find encouraging. And honestly, his pace and his ability to affect the media narrative so far does already kind of have that characteristic. So, I think after a couple days of thinking about it, probably the reason that he decided not to push for the primary right now is because it would have been an over-leverage of the amount of political capital that he has. He probably doesn't have enough sway to back a challenge like that to one of the leaders of the Democrats and still keep everything going smoothly. That's probably was the calculation. So the question arises of is that something that's going to happen down the road? Is that something that's on the table for Zohran? I'm not sure what the rules are for negotiations like that behind closed doors, but it seems to me that saying that making it clear that that type of tactic is on the table, if not right now, would be a way to apply some political pressure, and it would also be a way to be clearer with this audience that Sam's kind of giving you the opportunity to talk directly to. This is the progressive DSA, further left than that audience that you are talking to and saying this, and you have an opportunity to explain your thought process a little bit more in detail, and we didn't get that. But the reality is, in terms of this constituency of his, and there's two different ones, the most important one is New York City and whether he can pull some things off. And so I think the question is not, is he still trying to do that? I think obviously he is, and I think he'll probably have a decent amount of success and opportunity to do some good things. And he's surrounding himself, at least in terms of like this transition, people they're gathering information from. He is trying to surround himself with a wide variety of people that can help him understand the different sides of these issues, which, doesn't inherently bring down the integrity of his mayorship. Just having some real estate developers that are sort of consulting this transition, really he's contextualizing what he's going to be walking into. And one of the emerging concerns is that there's going to be essentially the wrong side of abundance, where you're allowing developers to build a lot on just the principle that developers building more is a good thing, which leads to gentrification, people being pushed out of their neighborhoods, and the same types of economic patterns that we've been seeing. So, Zohran opened the door to a few people like that in this transition process. Does not mean that that's where he's going to go policy-wise, but he has gestured at that when talking, next to Trump, or, he's made reference to the abundance language before. He seems to like that idea. And I think that could be positive, except it has to be balanced with the aggressive approach to the other policies, some of which these same developers are going to be aggressively opposing. And you're definitely going to see them talking out of both sides of their mouth in order to get the green light to build and build and build. And then they're going to turn right around and try to stop you from passing measures that keep the rent low or restrict them from exploiting people. So the other thing too is that there is now a new council speaker in New York, Julie Menin. She just won the council speaker race, which was internal in the city council. And she is definitely like big on the developer side and, more moderate Democrat who amassed a lot of support within this internal city council race, including the endorsement of a decent amount of unions as well, which is important to note. But specifically on things like cheaper rent and changing the police department so that less calls are being taken by the police and more are being taken by the sort of community services team. She's been clear that she's not going to be friendly to those policies, but she has said that she wants to work with them when it comes to affordable childcare and affordable housing. But like I said, she's in with the developers. And like I said, if that can be balanced with affordable housing, then it's good policy. Building more housing that isn't government subsidized isn't a bad thing, but it's just not a solution. So you have to have a solution, and the more aggressively you're going to build, the more aggressively you have to try to approach the solutions that are going to alleviate some of those market forces that push the prices up. So that's where he's going to run into a big clusterfuck, and these people that he's letting in because he wants to be magnanimous and he wants to hear from all sides. I mean, that's what a responsible leader does, but at the same time, they're going to stab you in the back. They've done it to every president, and they're going to try to do it to you as well. But I think Zohran's smart enough to know that. So I should note too, just as I'm being critical here, that a lot of these appointments to his transition team are really good, and he's surrounding himself with some really good voices, including some anti-Israel and anti-Zionist activists. I was reading this article that was like talking about how terrible and scary and anti-Semitic they are, and you're just going down. It's like based. Like everything was checking out. They couldn't even really find that many negative things to say. And his choices for the Arts and Culture Transition Committee seem pretty good. It seems like there's some talk there about, making sure that artists have, resources and funding, which is always a hard thing to be consistent about. So it's not all bad. These are a lot of people that are getting involved in this transition process. And most of them are people that are like associated with the Mamdani or DSA agenda somehow, some way, as well as just like a lot of experienced people. And I think it's something I've been thinking about lately, where it's kind of an oversimplification of all things. But, if you want something to grow, you got to give it room to grow. And if you want something not to grow, you have to take away the space that it has. And so I think that's the case at the beginning of this administration as well, that it's like he does seem to be making space for voices of, you know, people who are anti-Israel, anti-Zionist, and speaking strongly about that, even though there's been some reporting that he has tempered talk like that behind the scenes. It does seem like he's making space for that, which is the most important thing. Not necessarily him being the voice all the time, but you make space so that policy change and pressure can occur. But the same can also be true for some of these other things like real estate developers and people who have business interests. You know, it's okay to be able to negotiate and have a relationship with people across the city. The implications are wider now for anything that he does, any decision that he makes. You know, going into an executive position, it kind of transcends politics at a certain point and just becomes your decisions have a lot of implications. So excluding the business element wouldn't work. But the question is, how much space are you going to allow for that form of politics, which has in fact eroded New York to the point that caused you to run for your campaign in the first place? So I'm sure that's not lost on him, but he's going to have to keep his eye on it, because the more space there is for it, for that type of for those type of corrosive relationships to be built within his administration and within his base of political power, the more it's going to grow into something that controls him, just like it controls every other politician. But yeah, that being said, I've been tough enough on Mamdani for a couple episodes now, so I'll ease up. I'll let the guy cook. We'll see what happens. The situation will develop. He's going to be sworn in on the 1st of January, so the job doesn't really start until then.
Pressure getting pressed, do you feel it now? What even happens next, I don't really know. Voice carries less, can you hear me now? Soon as I get blessed, time's running out. Pressure getting pressed. Pressure getting pressed. Feel the pressure getting pressed. Yeah. Pressure, do you feel it now? I'm just saying this.